How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling in this most interesting time in the history of professional wrestling. We're going, of course, in a couple of, about half an hour, we're going to have Jerry the King Lawler up. We've got Brian Alvarez here for the whole 2 hours. And, Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
You're doing good?
Yep.
I'm barely surviving.
Yeah.
How late were you up last night?
Actually, I was only up till about 2:30, but I ended up getting up a lot earlier than I expected this morning, so it didn't exactly balance out.
Oh, I was so glad when this issue was over. It's a good issue. In fact, actually, from a news standpoint, I think there's more information in this issue than probably any issue all year. A lot more than even last week. So, I mean, when I read over the issue when I woke up this morning, I was real happy with it. Not necessarily the writing of it, but that's about as good as I'm going to do. But I was just so glad it was over. I was just too big of a story.
2 weeks in a row.
That you had to write at the last minute because, Monday night was so much of the story. What were they going to do on Monday night? And then the other thing with the big story is that, there's so many unanswered questions. You know what I mean? So you're trying to get answers, all night long. And most, and nobody really knows the answers yet because there are no answers.
Yeah. And
then, there's SmackDown last night and Shawn Michaels disappearing and all that. Anyway, I think the first thing we'll talk about is, before we get to the SmackDown results, is this is the situation with Shawn Michaels. He was originally scheduled to be on on Raw on Monday, and he was pulled from Raw just because there was so much going on the show, and the angle he was going to do, they moved it to SmackDown. Now, he was pulled from SmackDown, not over time constraints, but because whatever it is, and I don't know what it was that he was supposed to do, but whatever it was, they didn't think he would be able to pull it off. And he was very unhappy, and he left. I don't know what that means as far as, he was supposed to be at WrestleMania. I don't know that he won't be at WrestleMania. I don't know that he will. We'll try to find out in the next couple of days what all that means. So, anyway.
They didn't know if he could pull it off.
Yes. They did not think they should put him on the air.
Okay. That was kind of the story I heard, but the way you explained it sounded a little bit different.
Well, anyway, that's the deal.
Well, there you go.
Let's go to some SmackDown stuff. Let me see where we go. It opened with Triple H cutting a promo on The Undertaker. The Undertaker came out, ran down, went to attack him, and The Undertaker was again arrested.
Presumably by real cops this time.
This time they were real cops, yeah. They had some backstage stuff where William Regal warned Rock, Austin, and Deborah that they have to stay in their dressing rooms and they must not do anything to endanger the main event, which of course means that they're coming out later in the show. X-Pac and Just Incredible over the APA when the RTC interfered. Taz tried to make the save, but he got laid out as well. So, of course, that puts some heat on the six-man for WrestleMania. Taz and the APA against the RTC. With Taz injured, Paul Heyman came out for commentary. So, commentary is probably going to be a lot better this week. Let's see. Shane McMahon showed up, and they would show him backstage talking to different people. Billy Gunn, the Hardys, and Chris Jericho.
Billy Gunn, good.
Billy Gunn, yeah. So that's all they did with Shane McMahon, and he had a license plate that said WCW1, so I guess Shane has got a new license plate in record time. And Vince got all mad at the idea that he was looking to steal talent, and Vince went to Chris Jericho and reminded him that he had a ironclad contract and he could not jump. So I don't know I guess he didn't remind Billy Gunn.
He's probably looking over Billy Gunn's contract going, I wonder if I can get rid of this guy.
Yeah. Hey, maybe I can send him there.
That would be good revenge on his son.
Yeah.
Look, Shane, I got a guy for you. It's Billy Gunn.
Yeah. Shane never appeared before the live crowd. By the way, they did have a sellout last night at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. Benoit and Test beat Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero when Benoit put the crossface on Eddie Guerrero. Then after the match, Kurt Angle put the ankle lock on Benoit, and Benoit did tap. So that's Paul Heyman stuff. I mean, no one's told me that, but I know it. Because, the whole thing that they're doing with this, and it's real smart, is that they're getting the submissions over. And the top guys are tapping when they're locked in a submission, which makes the submissions that much stronger. Very good. I mean, I think that it's really good.
And it doesn't make it such a big deal when someone does tap out.
Yeah, because other people
they used to make such a big deal out of it, like, oh, my God, this guy will never tap out. So you thought, if he does tap out, what a wimp.
I used to hate whether it was when Heenan used to do that a lot, Monsoon used to do that, when a guy would get like a submission hold on and they go, you will never see this man tap, and I go, then why did that wrestler just waste his time putting that submission hold on?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it takes away. Plus, the other thing is, in a real life for the wrestlers, you know, putting the submissions on, even though those submissions actually in real life would break, you know, not necessarily break bones, but tear ligaments and stuff. But the submissions are actually far more dangerous than anything if they were used for real. But being that it's pro wrestling, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, the submissions are actually easier on your body than the big bumps that set up the pinfalls. So if you could do a match, and they do this in Japan all the time. I mean, Muto's doing it now, and I mean, Muto's over there having good matches, believe it or not, where he just does mat work and they go from submission to submission, and he doesn't have to take bumps. He's not doing moonsaults anymore, and he can still be effective, and it's not as hard on his body.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get the submission, you know, of course, the best style is a guy who still can physically take the bumps and do the flying moves and do the submissions. But, I mean, the submissions add something in between the big bumps and the high-flying moves, another thing that hopefully, if they're over, you know, can, you know, transition the match, so to speak, or work the match. And also, knowing that you're building to a submission makes the working the body part so much more effective because
people believe if he put that submission on, it might work.
Right, exactly. I mean, from a psychology standpoint. Anyway, Steve Austin comes out and calls out The Rock, but Vince McMahon comes out and says that there's no way that The Rock's coming out, which of course means he's coming out, because it will never let that WrestleMania main event be in jeopardy. By the way, Brian, you know that the WrestleMania is $39.95?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. We never really talked about it. I don't know if that really makes a difference other than I think it guarantees it's going to be the biggest money wrestling show of all. Well, I shouldn't say that because last year they had the $49.95 price. So it
yeah, but last year you had the option to pay less. This year you don't.
Right. Yeah, but last year was 34. So, but for the point, it may not be the biggest money. It'll be one of the, you know, it's going to be one of the two biggest if it's not the biggest Sunday show. Let's see. So anyway, Rock ends up coming out. They end up throwing beer on each other. They start fighting, and it was just a pull apart with a bunch of referees and stuff like that. And they were taken away by the police into separate dressing rooms, never to be seen again for the rest of the night. Rhino beat Matt Hardy when Christian interfered, but after the match, the Dudleys came out, and it ended up with the Dudleys edging Christian and the Hardys out there fighting with ladders and tables to build up the match on Sunday. And Rhino took a 3D through the table. Tell you, you know, that Mania show, you know, there's going to be, okay, Rock and Austin will probably be a 4-star match. Maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more. Benoit and Angle, I would bet that they'll do right at 4 stars, if not more. The tables, ladders, and chairs will probably be a 4-star match. It's going to be a hell of a show.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with Undertaker arrested...
China and Ivory?
Well, no, it's not going to be like the greatest show of all time. I'm just saying that there's going to be... and the gimmick battle royal, there'll be some bad wrestling, too.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, Triple H came out to the Undertaker's music on the Undertaker's motorcycle, being the Undertaker was arrested, and then started smashing it with a sledgehammer and knocked it off the stage, which I heard does not come off as good as it sounds, because he had trouble moving that big motorcycle, and when it went off the stage, it didn't make a big crash.
I wonder if they're going to show 15 replays like they did that time that Undertaker threw Kurt Angle's scooter off the stage. Remember that? They showed like 15 replays like this thing took a bump.
Yeah. Then Vince is in a bad mood over what Shane did, so he's cheering up. So he books Trish against Ivory in a bra and panties match, and ends up with Ivory pulling Trish's shirt off, and then realizing what she's done, tries to put it back on. And Ivory doesn't, Trish Stratus doesn't want it back on. And it ends up with Chyna tearing the clothes off of Ivory, who's wearing those big granny panties, so everyone gets to laugh. Let's see, Regal cuts a promo. And anyway, the main event is Regal and the Big Show against Kane and Jericho, which is quite the main event for the final show before WrestleMania. And Raven hits Jericho with Raven distracts Jericho. Regal hits him with a fire extinguisher and makes him submit to the Regal stretch, which is his new finisher. And that was actually the end of SmackDown right there. I mean, Undertaker ended up coming back out after the show was over, and him and Kane beat everybody up, including Triple H, who came back. And anyway, that was the show.
We didn't talk about the greatest news on the entire show.
What was that?
Vince McMahon telling Deborah her services were no longer needed.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Anyway.
That's fabulous news. She's out of the main event.
Yep. That is. Now, what do we have here? We've got a poll question. Let's see, this is for yesterday. Very different results for the Monday night poll question. For the last Monday night poll question, by the way, of all time. What did you think of Monday night's wrestling? Raw was better 40%. Nitro was better 49%, which tells you that 89% of the people watched both shows, which is entirely different than most weeks. Didn't watch Raw 1%, didn't watch Nitro 5%, didn't watch either show 5%. Today's question is, who would you hire as the lead announcer for WCW? A, Tony Schiavone. I only got 5 picks. B, Scott Hudson. C, Mike Tenay. D, Kevin Kelly. E, Michael Cole. Did I leave out somebody good? Probably a lot of people good. Mauro Ranallo.
Did you have anybody good?
Mauro Ranallo. You know who that is?
Who?
Mauro Ranallo. You don't know who that is?
No.
He's the announcer for Matt Rats. That's my pick. And I'm not being facetious. He's awesome.
Huh.
Seriously, this guy is like, except for Ross, he's the best announcer out there. Great. No one knows him, except stuck up in Calgary. He did the announcing for Stampede, too. It's not like he just showed up for Matt Rats. Really funny, knows every move, gets guys over. He's just really, really good. Anyway, any more news?
The meeting today at the power plant.
Yes.
Basically, everybody was fired. Actually, I don't know if fired's the right word. Laid off, which...
some of the guys are going to be kept on for 30 days for a transition period, but basically, yeah, that's what happened.
So pretty much what everybody expected, and they were told they could apply to the WWF, and I'm sure most of them will at least try, but who knows.
And they were reading the list of people who have severance packages coming, and one of the names listed was Vince Russo, which was kind of interesting. We'll have more on the meeting later on the website, because I didn't really get a chance to. I talked to someone, like, very briefly, but just because I did a radio show right before this one, I didn't have a chance to go in depth on that.
So Russo was one of those 24 contracts that they picked up? No. By the way, that was hilarious. Because of the delay and everything, I didn't get Figure 4 till yesterday. That was a really good issue. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, we'll tell you how to get Observer and Figure 4 later in the show if you're interested. I'm sure. I would presume that this week's would be real kind of collector's issues because last 2 weeks were kind of like 2 of the newsier weeks of our lifetimes. Let me see. What do we have here?
Do you hope that absolutely nothing happens this week?
Well, we got WrestleMania, so it's right there. And, the one good thing, too, is that I got tons of letters. Great letters to catch up on.
Yeah.
So, there's no problem. This I almost thought this was like the storm before the calm, to paraphrase an old saying. Because, with these last 2 weeks, as I was writing, and, this is like some of the hardest work I've done in a long time, and I'm really sick, too, is... I kept thinking this is like last night when I was writing, after Tuesday night is over, it's all downhill from here. As far as there's no more WCW. It'll be under the WWF banner, but it's WWF. There's no more WCW. It's just, there's going to be less television. It's just not going to be as hard. It may not be as interesting, but it's just not going to be as hard. And there's never going to be, no one's going to buy Vince in the next year. So there's never going to be another story like this anytime soon. It's kind of bad. Subscriptions are like going through the roof because of the big story. And now I'm thinking but there's no follow up. Once, I guess there's a couple weeks on who's going to be retained and who's not. But there can't be any news this big. There hasn't.
It won't be this big, but I think once they start the show, there'll be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, the show better be awesome. I think everyone pretty much agrees on that one. If that show is anything less than awesome, it's going to die.
I think for 8 weeks it'll be kind of slow until they start it up. Because what really is there?
Even so, and then plus it's post. We don't have one company to cover.
Yeah.
In this country.
I was just thinking about tonight. There's no Thunder.
That's fine. Believe me, I'm gonna just take a nap. I need the nap. But no, I'm looking at it like, I started thinking about it in a good way. I'm going to start watching the Tuesday night wrestling on Galavision every week, which I will enjoy. Although I watched some of the AAA while I was eating dinner last night, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, so maybe I won't.
Production.
What?
The production.
What about it?
That's kind of what got me. It's almost like the Thunder. It's just so dark.
Yeah. I just...
You watch EMLL, it's all well lit and, all happy music, and then all of a sudden there's dark AAA.
Yeah. Plus, also, it's just, I don't
Garbage
know.
wrestling.
Yeah, it's so much garbage wrestling. So I'll get to watch more Japan, which is cool. I started watching some of that this afternoon. I saw some stuff with Don Fry and Yuji Nagata. I mean, like, they were in a tag match with Don Fry and Robbie Rage against Yuji Nagata and Katsuki Sasaki. It was like awesome mat wrestling. Like it was like, you know, I'm watching it going like, you know, I never think of Don Fry as a good worker, but in these sequences he's phenomenal. Or Yuji Nagata is just that good, which in fact he is. So what else? Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's from Mike Parker, who goes, if TV for WCW is 6 to 8 weeks away, what will they do to keep it fresh in viewers' minds? Oh, they'll do teasers on Raw and SmackDown. They have to, obviously. Can we assume there will be some WCW talent seen on WFTV? I don't know. I mean, based on what I was told, no. I think it may just be Shane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there should be, just to build up. Certainly the last 2 weeks before the new show debuts, they've got to expose it. So I would think it's all work.
Maybe have somebody in the crowd with one of those signs. Remember they did that with ECW? Yeah. Nobody will ever forget that Sabu fears Taz sign.
Mm-hmm.
Do something like that.
Yeah.
You can't really have WCW guys just come out on TV and cut a promo. Wouldn't make any sense.
No, but they have to do some teases and things like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you know when we talk about that phrase, this is all work in progress,
mm-hmm.
I scared myself with that one, because remember what the last work in progress was? The XFL.
Oh.
I mean, when that thing, like, in hindsight, I mean, they will be the first ones to admit that they started that thing and they were not ready.
Yeah, but he was jumping into something completely different.
But this is different waters, too. I mean, you're
it's different waters, but at least it's the same industry.
Yeah, you're right. It's their industry where it's their field of expertise as opposed to a whole new field. But it's 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Saturday night on TNN. I mean, they're starting out with one strike against them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Anyway, I would think this would have to keep the Shane versus Vince angle going beyond WrestleMania. Well, obviously, Shane and Vince can't do a blow-off. I don't think, obviously not. Okay, let me see. Minus every big name, except for Booker T, likely not being part of the new WCW. The only way I can foresee the McMahon successfully building WCW into an equal is to divide both rosters in half and mix and match. Well, I think they got it, and I think they know that they got to send guys over, and they will. And I think that Vince even told guys, that he's got to send guys over. So that's just a question of it's. When I start thinking about it, I think The Rock's the guy they should send.
Mm-hmm.
Even more than Hunter. Hunter's a better worker than The Rock. But the thing is Rock is not working house shows anyway. So you're not losing him there. And WWF can survive with Austin and Hunter and without Rock on Monday and Thursday. And Rock is one guy who is so strong that if people think their only chance to watch The Rock is on Saturday night, they may go out of their way to do that. Whereas Hunter, people will not go out of their way to see a bunch of nobodies in Hunter. But they will go out of their way to see Rock, and maybe Rock can elevate those guys. Also, the other thing is Rock elevates guys better than Hunter.
Yeah, he has no problem putting anybody over.
Yeah, if Rock goes in there and puts people over, Rock can make stars. So
and the other thing is, this isn't going to be his last movie project.
No.
By any means. And there's going to be, I'm sure, I don't know, if he's got anything, like, scheduled for this summer or winter or anything like that, but there's going to be a time when he's gone all the time. And this is perfect schedule. Yeah,
but the thing is, if by then they have enough of this stuff built up, I just hope they don't send, like, the Big Show and Billy Gunn.
Billy Gunn.
Yeah. Let's see, don't you think it was sad that Ric Flair's last Nitro match was in front of a bunch of drunk college kids in Florida rather than in Charlotte?
At least they were alive.
I didn't have a problem with that. I would love, and it won't, I don't think it'll happen, but I think it would be really good for the WWF to do a Ric Flair retirement tour, and maybe, but I don't know that he needs to wrestle every night on it. Maybe Ric Flair farewell appearances. Something, he deserves it, but I don't know. Nobody believes in retirements anyway, and Ric Flair how many times has Ric Flair done retirement stipulations? So it's kind of like, to me, when Ric Flair did that thing with Hogan in, what year was it, in 94, when he retired? After that, it was kind of like, in my opinion, and everyone knows I like Rick, in my mind, it was like, okay, Rick, you screwed yourself of any real retirement because, no one's going to believe it anyway.
Yeah.
This is from Jarrett, Jarrett. who said, I heard UFC was going to do a show in New York or New Jersey a while back, and it was canceled for some reason. Why was it canceled? And well, the same thing happened in June. Actually, it was Extreme Fighting many years ago. This was actually the beginning of the end. They scheduled a show in New York when the law passed to legalize it, and the New York Times, in particular, wrote story after story and editorials of how is this stuff going to be allowed in New York, and the mayor of New York got involved, and all of a sudden, all the legislators who had voted the law in reversed the field and banned it immediately. And UFC actually had run a show, was scheduled to run a show in Niagara Falls, right around the same period of time. So it would be in New York State, but they wanted to stay away from the New York market because they didn't want the heat. And the mayor of Niagara Falls, I think, there was so much heat in Niagara Falls that they actually was like the Wednesday. No, it wasn't the Wednesday. It was like the Friday before, or the Thursday night before the show. It was like the night before the fight. They had to charter all these jets and fly everyone to Dothan, Alabama, and they had to put the show on in Dothan, Alabama, and they were literally still setting up the octagon like minutes before the pay-per-view started in Dothan, Alabama. And so you had all these fighters who didn't sleep the night before. And I remember, like, I was going to go to that show in Niagara Falls, and it was like Tuesday and Wednesday, and I hadn't decided. It was kind of like, am I going to go? Am I not going to go? I forget what the fights were right now, but it was like I was leaning towards going, and David Isaacs, who was running UFC, and I knew about there was a court fight coming up, and David Isaacs said, like, oh, don't worry about the court fight. It's in the bag. We're going to win. And as soon as he told me that, I said, like, I'm staying home because they're going to have to, like, fly everyone to a new location in Alabama at the last minute, and I would rather be home rather than take that trip. And that's what happened. Let's see. Has Vince personally approached any of the big-name performers like Goldberg? Not yet. About taking a buyout and signing a new contract. And if not, do you expect him to? I would, if I was Vince, I would talk to him. You know, I would talk to him. Economically, it just doesn't make sense for Goldberg to do it unless, but if Vince wants him, Vince can afford to pay Goldberg, as much as that.
Whatever he wants.
He can afford to pay him whatever he wants because Goldberg can make it up if he's booked correctly in money that he's going to draw. But it's the whole thing of will he do it? I don't know. And it's thing you don't want to. There's a weird thing. Oh, Vince is pretty good with salaries though. He doesn't want to up that salary structure. And with those XFL losses, I don't blame him if he can get away with it.
Especially the losses for next year.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just finish this up and we'll head to a break. In cases like Scott Steiner, could the WWF have a contract stipulation that would consider shooting a breach of contract? Shooting is a breach of contract, don't worry. Believe me, if anyone shoots either in the ring or for that matter goes against the script on an interview in the WWF, like we said before yesterday, they will only do it once. It's not going to be like WCW where it happens week after week and nothing happens to the stars.
Probably wouldn't even have a chance to do it a second time.
Exactly. No, they will be sent home, and they will be like Shawn Michaels when people will be going like, how come they're not using them? And it's like because they're trying to teach the rest of the guys a lesson that no matter how big a star you are, they have a script, and that's the script, and you don't go into business for yourself in the WWF, and it's got to be run that way. That was one of the big failures of WCW. And anyway, it's from Del Gray, who goes, whatever happened to Bret Hart? He's writing a book. Has he ever expressed...
Does this mean Pete Rose is going to end up the hardcore champion for about 10 seconds?
Ooh, boy. Yes. Well, you know what? If they were at the meeting, and they had, someone had suggested, just like you just did, they would all go, yes. If no one suggests it, okay? If no one suggests it, then no one will have thought of it, and then no. So what should we do? This reminds me of when I was a kid. Did I ever? I think I told you the story once. They did an angle where they told people, now whatever you do, they were going to do a strap match with his manager Gerhard Kaiser and Pat Patterson, and they announced it on television, but it was like a secret. And they kept saying week after week in the promos for this match at the Cow Palace.
Oh, yeah.
I told you the story.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you do, don't tell Kaiser. It's a secret. And they would do it on TV each week in the promos. Now, whatever you do, don't tell Kaiser. And I remember the very last week, which was the Saturday. This show aired Saturday night, right before the Cow Palace, a couple of hours earlier. And Kaiser's there and goes, You know, and they go, like, if you see him at the arenas, if you see him, just don't tell him, it's a secret. Kaiser goes, you know, there have been people saying something about strap. What is that? And they go, oh, they think that Patterson's going to give you a strap. And, oh, that's what it is? Oh, okay. So don't tell anyone in the booking committee.
They got to do that angle someday. But at the end, the Kaiser would come out the week before and go, I've been watching all the TV. I know about the strap match.
You know, which reminds me of some stupidity, is this is when I lived in Texas in 1984, and it's a Von Erich story. The show, for like 100 years, maybe not 100 years, but probably 15 years or 10 years or 8 years or however long, as long as anyone can remember, there was a show on Channel 11 in that era that was taped Monday night at the Will Rogers Auditorium in Fort Worth, and it would air Saturday night on TV on Channel 11. And it's always been like that. Well, anyway, one week, Kevin Von Erich comes out and he's doing this interview, and he goes, you know, I never knew this before, but somebody told me that this show airs on Saturday night. And I'm going like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, so anyway. Let's see, where were we? Let's see. So, Bret Hart, has he ever expressed interest in wrestling again, or at least being involved in the business? I don't expect him to ever wrestle again, but by saying that, you know, everyone always comes back. But I really don't expect him to wrestle again. Has his concussion ended? Is there any possibility of him getting into the ring again? Certainly not now. He's not talked about that at all. Do you think he would have a chance of showing up in the WWF now that everything is up in the air? I mean, you never say never 100%, but very, very unlikely. I think as long as maybe Vince is around, it's pretty unlikely.
What was the time frame that he was given before he ended up being terminated? Was it like this coming December?
Oh, before he could come back in?
Yeah.
I don't even know if there was one. I got the impression that he's been told, you know, that he could never wrestle again. Well, Hugh Morris was told the same thing.
Look at Vampiro.
Vampiro was told that he could come back.
Yeah, but it was a long time down the road.
Yeah, and then he got a clearance about 3 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he wanted to come back, which is now, Vampiro's another one. Let's see. Can you shed some light on the contract of Kevin Nash? I understand the concept of guaranteed contracts. Even if you don't wrestle, you get paid, but I can't imagine a guaranteed contract allows you to be insubordinate. I don't think that the contract allows him to be insubordinate, but nobody has the guts to do anything about it, and so he just did whatever he wanted. Mm-hmm. Couldn't WCW officials have forced Nash to go to the final Nitro and be in breach of contract? Yes, they could have, but I don't think anyone said that, like, if you don't go, you're going to be in breach of contract, because if they did, he'd gone. You're not going to turn down that kind of money.
The fact that they asked and didn't tell him says a lot.
Yeah.
When you ask a guy, hey, do you want to be there, you got to expect that they might say no.
Yeah, because Goldberg said the same thing. Neither of them, nobody was ordered to go. I mean, Sting went, you know, and I'm glad he did. Just, you know, for whatever reason, it was nice to see him. You know. Okay. Anyway, that's probably all we're going to talk about Kevin Nash, because we got Jerry Lawler on the line. Jerry, how are you today?
I'm doing well, but I'll tell you right off the bat, I can barely hear you.
We got get the.
That's a little better. That's a little better.
Okay, cool.
How are you?
We're doing really good. It's me and Brian Alvarez.
Yeah.
And this last 10 days of wrestling have been probably the most momentous 10 days, maybe in the history of wrestling. How do you, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on everything that's gone down?
Oh, well, you're right. Everything's sort of a blur for me. I mean, my blur started a little bit longer than 10 days ago. You know, mine started 2 days after No Way Out, which has been nearly a month ago now. And you're right. It's been the craziest sequence of events. It's been the weirdest things that I've ever seen, and I've seen things that I thought would never happen. And I don't know. I think it's almost too early to speculate on anything, because it's not over. Things are still changing as we speak. You know, so I'm just kind of sitting back and seeing what is going to take place.
Did you watch the shows on Monday night?
I watched, to be quite honest with you, I watched a little bit of Nitro, and then that's all I watched.
Okay, so you didn't see. Well,
did you see the big angle?
See the stuff?
I'm sorry?
The angle with Vince? Did you see the angle with Vince and Shane?
No.
Okay. Well, it's quite something to see. You know, where they simulcasted the two things. What was weird on the Raw show, and I don't know if you've talked to people or what you've heard about, was there was, Vince was out there talking about WCW talent that he apparently, I think, didn't want.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was almost like firing people on the air, like Animal and Jeff Jarrett. I mean,
right.
It was I don't know what he did or what he didn't do. It was very strange.
The only thing I heard is my friend Randy Hales told me what he said about Jeff Jarrett about spelling the name and then saying now he's Gone. If that's what he did, that's what he told me he did. I didn't hear what did he do with Animal. I didn't hear about that.
They had a clip of Animal. What did he say, Brian? Do you remember?
I don't even remember the Animal thing. I just remember Jarrett and Dustin.
Okay, he ripped on Dustin and said, "Can you imagine that this guy wanted, breast implants when he was here?" And he said with Lex, he goes, I think the Lex Express is what he said, run out of steam or run out of gas or something.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah, so it was a very
well, I mean, let's face it. I mean, Vince has the opportunity now to. He can basically write his own ticket. He can do exactly what he wants, and that has always been one of the things that Vince enjoyed doing was adding a bit of realism into his storylines or whatever, and I think that's exactly what he's doing there. I think that he is sending a message probably to those guys that they're not going to be wanted by the WWF.
One of the things that's going to come up next, obviously, is WWF versus WCW angle in some form. And I was thinking back over the last 20 years that a lot of times when people have had opportunities to do these type of angles, and as often as not they fail. And the one that I remember as being probably the most well done and most successful was the one with you and Randy Savage back 83, 84, whenever it was. And what do you think are like the pitfalls of what to avoid or the way to do it to where it doesn't either burn out quick or just fall apart?
Right. Well, now if you think back on what happened with in our situation with Randy Savage, and I think the reason that it went so well was because it wasn't a long, drawn-out situation, as this will have to be. I mean, because, let's face it, Vince owns both companies, so it'll pretty much it'll have to continue on. We did ours in which and ours, sort of like Vince's, ours stemmed from a real series of events. And in fact, Randy Savage and his father and his brother, Lanny Poffo, they had their own little small upstart promotion there in Lexington, Kentucky. And of course, I was with, Jerry Jarrett, and I had Jarrett Promotions, and Lexington was one of our monthly stops in our territory. And these guys just, they made that their home, and they to their credit, did a good job of building up a little small local promotion there. And there were, I guess, legitimate hard feelings for a while there. They did everything they could on their TV. They would go on and basically knock us, and sometimes even and do challenge matches, and sometimes even say that I would be at their arena to wrestle against, to accept the challenge of Randy Savage, which of course that kind of thing never took place, and I think it was really counterproductive for them, and we basically just sort of ignored them for a while, and then finally the case was they just ran out of money to promote their own deal there, and so they called up Jerry Jarrett and I and said, guys, is there any way we can work something out where we can basically work together? We're either going to go under with this thing and stop trying to promote it, or we can try to make something out of it. And so basically what we did, we just made one big match instead of it going on and on. There was just the one big promotion versus promotion match, and we had one of their referees and one of our referees, and we had Randy Savage against me, and we had their promoter in Randy's corner and our promoter in my corner, and it it pretty much sold out Rupp Arena there in Lexington. But then that was it, and that was really successful. But I think had we tried to carry it on for week and week and week, then the fans would have, they would have seen through it, and they would have lost interest fast. I think that another reason that worked then was because it's so different than it is now. Now in the days of the internet and everybody being so knowledgeable about what goes on behind the scenes, how is that going to have any appeal? I'd say 95% of the people are going to know that, let's face it, Vince owns both companies. It's not a real
They said it on their TV.
Right.
Later.
Right. I mean, it's not going to have. I just don't think it's going to have the same effect as some of the ones in the past.
But from your situation, is it just sit and wait and see how the landscape develops, or do you got any? I mean, it was when you left the WWF a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was very different for you because, quite frankly, if Eric Bischoff got started, and I don't know how much you talked or if you even did talk, the reality was he was going to come to you. He had to. You were a big name. You were a good announcer. They needed help on the announcing side anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, with that no longer being an option, I mean, you've got your local thing, but to be on national television, I mean, your option is Vince McMahon or nobody right now.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And it's true. When this all first happened, it was never my intention to or anything that Stacy or I either one wanted to go work for anybody else. This hit us completely cold out of the blue. We were both perfectly happy in the World Wrestling Federation, and thought that everything was fine until that day. And of course, then when something like that happens, you're sort of in shock for a while, and then you start trying to weigh your options. And of course, we both felt that, like you said, that somebody from WCW would probably want our services, but we didn't contact anybody. We didn't, I quite frankly wouldn't even know how to call anybody there or who to call. And so there was no contact made. And then, of course, all of the other rumors started flying around, and then they became reality that Vince bought WCW. So as you say, now there is no other option out there except Vince. And I think that Vince has pretty well made it clear to us that we're not going to be coming back there.
Even the fact that Paul Heyman appeared in your spot like the following Monday after you were gone, you think there was anything to that, or was it just a coincidence, or what do you thought?
They were ready with a new guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like the JFK assassination or something. There's a lot of theories out there, and I literally have been getting a minimum of 1,000 emails a day and not just all over the country, but all over the world. And I'm shocked at how many people in the United Kingdom. I think everybody in the United Kingdom has a computer and has my email address. It's like unbelievable the amount of email I get from there. But I mean, from South Africa, from India, from Australia, from Ireland. And everybody knows about what has happened, and I'm getting all sorts of ideas and theories, and of course I had my own, and it's not any secret. I think I've pretty much expressed on my website, which by the way is kinglawler.com. I think I've pretty much expressed what some of the theories that I think could have been behind this. The only thing that I feel certain in my heart is that what they told us is not true. I mean, the reason that they said Stacy was let go and I subsequently is gone, I don't believe that it was anything to do with her attitude. I think there's something more to it than that. And that's where there are several theories, but I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what it was.
You mentioned that you've kind of gotten the impression from the WWF that they would not want you back. Now, have they ever made a thing to you or something, some sort of a olive branch that you could come back, but that they would not want your wife back, or has it just been one of those things, or has that not ever been said to you?
Well, I guess it was said to me sort of unofficially, but then the next day it was officially pulled back. And a lot of people have gotten a lot of response from fans, and maybe this is a good opportunity to clear the air as to what all is going on. A lot of people say, why don't you call Vince and try to smooth this over and all of that sort of thing. And just to tell you the sequence of events, we did the No Way Out in Las Vegas on the Sunday. Then we did, of course, the Phoenix. We did the Monday Night Raw, and then Tuesday is when all of this took place. When JR called JR called me in and said, King, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to tell anybody. And my first reaction, I was scared. I thought something had happened to possibly somebody in my family. Like, we were in Tucson, and I thought my mother was here in Memphis, 80 years old. I thought possibly something had happened to my mother or some member of my family, and JR was having to break the news to me. And I said, what's happened, JR? And he said, well, when I got here at 2:30 today, he said, Vince called me into his office and said, JR, I got something I need you to do. And he said, what's that? And he said, well, I've decided we're not going to go any further with Cat RTC angle, and as a matter of fact, I want you to give Stacy her release today. And I said, yeah, are you kidding or what? And he said, no. And he said, that's what he told me. And I said, well, what was the reason? And he said, well, he said something about the creative staff or the writers said something about Stacy's attitude, and they feel if they give her any more airtime that she'll just become impossible to work with. And then I thought, for sure this has got to be a joke. I mean, I said, you're kidding me, right? And he said, no, King, I'm not kidding. And he said, I don't know how to tell her. And he said, I was wondering if you would tell her. So now they're not only, telling me that Stacy's fired, they want me to go and tell, they want me to fire my wife, right? And so I said, well, yeah, I guess I'll tell her, JR. I'll tell her while I'm on my way to Memphis, because if you guys are going to treat her like that, then I'm out of here as well. So anyway, I went down. I basically had to tell Stacy that that she had been released, and I said, "Come on, get your stuff. We're going home." And on the way out, we saw Vince, and we stopped into his office for a second, and Stacy spoke first and said, "Vince, what did I do so bad to lose my job? What did I get fired over?" And Vince said, "Well, I'm not really sure. That's more of a talent relations issue." Well, JR is the head of talent relations, and he's the one that just told me he didn't know what it was about, that Vince just told him that when he walked into the building, And so, anyway, to make a long story short, I told Vince, I said, well, Vince, I think you know me well enough to know that I'm not going to stay here. And he said, well, King, I really appreciate everything you've done for us here in the WWF. You've gone above and beyond the call of duty, and you really helped us out a lot, and I want you to know we really thank you for that. He reached out, shook my hand, out the door we went. So we didn't hear a word from anybody for several days, not a word. We were just sitting at home. So what I'll do now is something that, nobody, this, as I said, a lot of people have said, well, have you talked to anybody? Did you try to talk to anybody? And because a lot of people think that, well, if I would go and say, ask for my job back or whatever, that it would be there. They think that a lot of people say, well, this is, it's basically your own fault for walking out. So, if you will, I'll read you a letter that I wrote the following Saturday, and I faxed this to New York and to JR, who pulled it off the fax machine and hand-delivered it to Vince, and he said he knows Vince read it, and still no response. And the letter was dated Saturday, March 3rd. It said, Dear Vince, now that a few days have passed since the events of last Tuesday, I've had some time to reflect on everything that has happened. I wanted to convey to you my feelings. First and foremost, I wish that last Tuesday had never happened. Both Stacy and I would like nothing better than for things to be like they were before Tuesday. Neither Stacy or I have any desire to work anywhere other than the World Wrestling Federation. That being said, we would both like to come back to the World Wrestling Federation if possible. I've racked my brain and tried to figure out exactly what caused Stacy's release. Yet if it's something as simple as her attitude, please understand that can change. She is willing to personally apologize to anyone she gave a problem to, or even an apology to the entire staff of the World Wrestling Federation, and assure everyone that in the future she'll be the easiest person to work with that they've ever seen. I feel personally responsible for Stacy's action because from the time I first met her when she was 19 years old until today, I've shaped and molded her into exactly who she is now, nothing more, nothing less. So her actions are a reflection on me. She really feels bad about the situation and is really blaming herself, and I know I am as much to blame as she. So if the reason for Stacy's release is really something other than her attitude, and of course I've been around long enough to know that anything is possible and that things are not always as they seem, then we'll be willing to try to fix whatever problem exists. The only personal problem that I can think of might be involved is between Stacy and China. At one time they were very close, but when China and Triple H had their problems, it seemed Stacy and China no longer had things in common, and they grew apart, culminating with China asking you not to have Stacy involved in her angle with Eddie Guerrero. So if China once again didn't want Stacy involved in her angle with RTC, then that can be addressed. Stacy would be content to go in another direction or just wait until creative comes up with something else for her to do. Stacy would also be willing to try to clear the air with China if that's the problem. What I'm saying is that Stacy would do absolutely anything to have her job back. It's also occurred to me that maybe Stacy wasn't the problem at all, that the real reason for releasing Stacy was to force me to leave without having to fire me. I thought that possibly NBC was upset with me over my XFL commentary and put pressure on you to get rid of me. If that's the case, I can understand and accept that decision, but I wish it wouldn't cost Stacy her job as well. If you just feel that it was time to make a change in the announcing situation, then I can understand that as well. If you have been dissatisfied with my performance in any way in the World Wrestling Federation, I wish you would at least allow me the chance to rectify the problems. Vince, I've been in the WWF since 1993. I've seen a lot of people with attitude problems or worse problems get second and third chances. I don't want to work anywhere else. You and everyone at the WWF are like family to me, and I'm feeling like I've lost a loved one. So I'm asking, is there any way this can be fixed? Can Stacy and I come back in any capacity? Can we work more or less? We're willing to do whatever you would want us to do to make this right. Could it be made into some kind of angle, business-wise, or whatever? You can reach me at my home number, which I gave my home number, my cell number, and then I said, thank you, Vince, and whatever you decide, I'll always be your friend and do anything I can for you. Yours very truly, Jerry Lawler.
And you've heard nothing back?
Not a word. Until today, we received our official releases in the mail, Federal Express today.
Isn't it interesting? The release comes right after they bought the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what to... Now on the, you mentioned the China thing in the letter.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on all that, or do you think that just may be a thing, or do you think that's a bigger thing than anyone's ever talked about?
That's one of those things. Your guess is as good as mine. Who knows? I do know that, they're, as I said, at one time, Stacy and China were very good friends, and Stacy and I and China and Triple H were good friends. At least I felt that way. I mean, they came to Memphis. We traveled together some. They came to Memphis. They stayed in our home. Stacy has stayed in their home in New Hampshire, and quite honestly, I don't want to delve into their personal lives and their business, but as I said, at one time we felt close, and I think it's pretty much public knowledge that at one time Triple H and China were, boyfriend, girlfriend, very close, and now that's. I'm not saying that they're not very close, but at least they're not the couple that they were at one time. And I think that this is just my thinking now. I think that a problem arose when the last February, not this past February before that, Stacy and I became engaged to be married, and it was like right after that, China and Triple H had their problems and sort of pretty much split up. And so it was almost like, Stacy and China didn't have that much in common anymore. It was like, if China was around Stacy here, she's around somebody that are looking forward to getting married and that sort of thing. And then, she had just broken up with Triple H. And so it was a kind of a situation where they grew apart there. And it sort of culminated into, if you remember when China was doing the breakup with Eddie Guerrero, I went to Vince and suggested a thing where Eddie Guerrero take Stacy out as the little mini-me China, his little Chinette to sort of get back at China as part of the storyline, right? And Vince, he when I suggested it, he slapped his head and he said, "That's great." He said, "I can't believe we didn't think of that. That's a great idea, King." Well, for one reason or other, China didn't think it was a great idea. And even though they went ahead and did that little angle that night, apparently China went to Vince the next day and said, I don't want her involved in my program. So
now, you wrote the RTC storyline with you heading towards WrestleMania, right?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I wrote the RTC storyline, but the way I originally, I say I wrote it, it was an idea that I gave to the writers and an idea that I gave to Vince, and then of course they decided to go with it there, but I didn't have it written the way that they did it. I didn't have myself involved at all. The way I had it written was that Stacy, basically that Stacy would demand a title match with Ivory simply because of Ivory had hurt China, and China was Stacey's friend, and she would demand a match with Ivory because she had beaten Ivory, and Ivory was the one that Stacey beat to become the WWF champion in the past, and in that water match or pudding match or whatever. But anyway, it was going to be Stacey demand a match with Ivory, and then Ivory would say, or Ivory and Steven Richards would say, well, you know what? She doesn't really deserve a title match, and she's got everything to gain and nothing to lose, so why don't we do this? The interview would have been Ivory saying, she's the little tramp that started the WWF on the road to ruin anyway by exposing herself on the pay-per-view. We need to teach her some morals. Why don't we do this? She can have a title match under one condition. If she wins, she's the WWF Women's Champion. But if she loses, she's got to join Right to Censor, and we will teach her some morals. And it didn't involve me at all, and they were going to, of course, have the match, and then Ivory win the match, and Stacey would have to be inducted into Right to Censor against her will. And then my ideas after that were that, the following day they were going to bring Stacey down dressed just like Ivory and Right to Censor, and as they started to make an interview talking about how they're going to make an example out of her, and they're going to bring her around and have Steven Richards say, tell the world how great it is to be in Right to Censor, and have Stacey just stammer and stutter and say, oh heck, I can't do it. Somebody hit my music, and boom, the stripper music starts playing. Boom, Stacey rips her dress off. She's down to bra and panties, and the Right to Censor's panicking, and they hustle her up to the back. And it was going to be a thing where each week they would try to force their influence on her, but she would stubbornly, try to fight off their influence, and then it culminate in. I just thought, I just had several different ideas where she could cause dissension in there. She could cause, the idea that I actually had for him to do the day that we got let go was, Val Venus was to go to Steven Richards and say, look, in my past, unfortunately, I've had to deal with women like the cat. You let me have a personal, hands-on few minutes with her, and I promise you results. I can bring her around to our way of thinking. And then have Val go into a room with Kat, and then, hour goes by, and Steven Richards and Right to Censor out there looking at their watches thinking, how long is this going to take? And then, of course, towards the end of the show, the door opens, and Val comes out all sweaty, his hair's all mussed, his tie's undone, he's got lipstick all over his collar, and in the background you see a smiling cat, and it's obvious that Val is backslid, right? Mm-hmm. And then, try this again next week with even Steven Richards, Steven Richards saying, well, I'm gonna take this into my own hands, and the same thing happens to Steven. And then after that, maybe even have Ivory say, well, you men don't know how to handle a woman. Let me take care of this situation. And there were endless possibilities of what could happen, right? And, of course, this stuff would have led up to WrestleMania, which was that wasn't necessarily my, I wasn't even thinking anything about WrestleMania at the time. It was just an idea to get Stacey involved in a storyline. And, who knows? I just think that it's a possibility that somebody could have been upset that this was, infringing on the other angle that was already set for WrestleMania, which would have been Ivory and China.
Well, it's just kind of interesting that that whole thing went down, and a couple weeks later, here's China back for that match.
Oh, right. Oh, believe me, China was there at Tucson, in a heavy conversation with Ivory and Stephanie right when the production meeting ended. Mm-hmm. But I mean, who's to know? Believe me, there's other theories out there. You heard me mention about the XFL commentary.
Yeah.
I mean, who's to say? I made a comment on the XFL game about Honda automobiles, and you never can tell. That could have been a problem. So somebody could have called Vince up and said from NBC and said, "Hey, man, the Honda people are going to pull their advertising if you don't get rid of this guy."
I was just looking at there as maybe, if someone said that, you take you off the XFL broadcast team. Why take you off Raw and SmackDown?
Well, that's true too.
And I read China's book. That's why I lean towards that theory.
What, China? The China thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Jerry, one thing, I guess, after you left the WWF, because, for you, aside from this big story of WWF and WCW, you've been in the news a lot, not just with the thing that happened in Tucson, but then about a little over a week ago, he returned to Memphis Television on Channel 5, and it ended up resulting in the WWF pulling the developmental talent away from Power Pro Wrestling. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought that's just spiteful or vindictive or being a little bit petty. I mean, how in the world is Stacy and I being on Memphis Television going to affect or adversely affect the WWF developmental deal? I mean, and you asked earlier about had there been any olive branches or anything like that floated. Well, week before last, this was not this past Thursday, but Thursday before last, I guess that's when word was given to Randy Hales that if Bruce Pritchard called Randy Hales that morning and said, Randy, we'd rather you not use King on your show. We're still, trying to figure out what's going to happen here. And Bruce said, at this time we're all hoping that King will come back. But right now we'd rather you not have him on the show and with our WWF talent. And so he said, well, I left him off the show last week, at your guys' request, and he said, he helps our ratings here in Memphis, and I really want to have him on the show. And Bruce said, well, I'm just going to tell you now that if you have him and Stacy on your show, then we're going to pull our deal from you, and we're going to, we're not going to have the wrestlers be on your show, and we're going to pull our $750 a week to you. So, anyway, then that was on a Thursday, and then amazingly enough, a little bit later on that day, I got a call from JR. This was the first time that JR actually called me. I had spoken to him a couple times, but I had always had to call him. But this is the first time he called me. And I won't quote word for word, but JR expressed his feelings that he thought that our chemistry on Raw was something that is going to be very, very difficult to replace, and that Kevin Dunn, who is he's the executive producer of television and that sort of thing, and that he and Kevin were in agreement that they would like to have me back on Raw. And he said, now, I'm not saying that we won't ever work with Stacy down the line. You never say never in this business. He said, but we're going to have a meeting tomorrow with Vince, and we would like for you to, we want to talk to Vince, and we would like for you to come back to Raw. And he said, and see if this would make it more palatable. If you want, you can come back and just do Raw and one pay-per-view a month. And he said, you don't even have to do SmackDown. He said, we can leave Paul on SmackDown, and you can just come in on Mondays and do your deal and head home. And so I said, well, just a couple of things. I said, let me ask you this. Now, I said, this has been really hard on Stacy. I said, she feels she got fired, and I feel she got fired for no apparent reason. Nobody will actually say what the problem is. And I said, JR, it's not just the money thing or anything like that. It's just embarrassing. It's traumatic, I said, can you approach Vince with this? I said, Stacy's contract is such that if she's not at TV, then she doesn't get paid. So, she has to be at the TV in order to get paid. So I said, if it's true that some of the writers have a problem with Stacy's attitude, or if the creative team has a problem, I said, JR, you and I know that you and I have been here a lot longer than all of these writers put together, and they come and go like the wind, And he said, that's right. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Is there a way to just leave Stacy on the roster? I mean, so that she's still a WWF diva, so to speak, but you don't bring her to TV. She's not costing you a penny. She's not at TV. She's not in any of the writers' hair. There's no problem there. And then down the road, if this blows over or if they can think of something else that they want her to do in the future, then you bring her back to TV. Until then, she just stays home, and there's no problem for anybody, and I come back. And he said, well, we'll talk to Vince about it tomorrow. So, and then I said, now let me ask you one other thing. I said, Randy Hales got called by Bruce Pritchard this morning and said that if we're on TV here Saturday, that his deal's going to be pulled. And JR said, that's too much. He said, don't worry about that. He said, I'll get that straightened out. He said, it's not going to hurt anything for you guys to be on TV. And I said, well, can I tell Randy to call you and tell him that? And he said, yeah, tell him to call me. So I hung up the phone. I felt good, and I called Randy, and I said, call JR, and I think you'll be happy. And so Randy calls me back in a few minutes, and he said, oh, this is great. He said, I talked to JR. He said, it's fine to have you on the show, and he said, things look promising. I said, cool. So that was on a Thursday, right? Friday comes, and this is when they're supposed to have their meeting with Vince. There's no phone call. Now it's Friday afternoon, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's Randy Hales. And I could tell immediately he's all down, he's dejected, and I said, what's the problem? He said, well, boy, what a difference a day makes. I said, what's that? He said, well, I just got a call from Bruce Pritchard, and he said, once again, without a shadow of a doubt, that I cannot have you or Stacy on my show Saturday, and if you guys are on there in any way, shape, form, or fashion, videotape or anything, they'll pull their deal and they'll pull all their talent. Now, this is Friday afternoon, and the show's got to go on Saturday morning, right? He said they'll pull all their talent from the show, and they'll pull my $750 a week developmental deal. And I said, wow. Well, let me call JR. I called JR in his office. I said, JR, I guess the meeting didn't go too well, huh? And he said, no, King, it didn't. He said, has Kevin not called you? He said, Kevin Dunn was supposed to call you and tell you everything. And I said, no, I haven't heard from Kevin. He said, well, I'll call him. I'll tell him to call you. And I said, that's all right. I'll call Kevin now. Hung up with JR. I called Kevin Dunn, and he said, well, King, I said, once again, I said, I guess the meeting didn't go too well, huh, Kevin? He said, no. He said, Vince just feels that the hurdles are too big to overcome. And I said, what hurdles are those? And he said, well, what you did to the company. I said, what I did to the company, which would be what? And he said, well, you walked out on us that day right before SmackDown, and then you gave out the writers' email addresses on your website and the company's telephone number. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, let's be realistic. First of all, Kevin, the email addresses. I said, give me a break. I said, it takes touching one button to delete all your email. And I said, it takes a total of about 15 seconds to change an email address. I said, so that's a big high hurdle right there. I said, and second of all, anybody can call information and get the company's telephone number. I said, that was no big secret. And he said, well, Vince just said that he'd rather just part ways. I said, well, okay. So that's it. I guess we'll be getting our releases. And he said, yeah, you'll be sent your release tomorrow. Well, of course, a whole week went by, and like you said, we didn't get our release until the day after the WCW deal went down.
Yeah. The thing that's so weird about that is in a sense, they spited themselves as far as the developmental talent because, I mean, to me, one of the best things about the Memphis deal is that they're on a live television show that's actually watched, it's not a public access show. It's an NBC affiliate. It's watched by a lot of people. And I mean, that's a great way to, that's a great way to learn how to do your interviews and how to project yourself on television.
Right.
And, as a prelude to being on Raw, because Raw also is a live show.
Exactly right.
It's like, what's the downside? It's not like you got a WCW guy there or something that could have been an intermediary talking to these guys or something. It's, an unaffiliated guy.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I swear, I've been in the wrestling business over 30 years, and I thought I was pretty knowledgeable on what you should and shouldn't do, and that's these are just some things I just don't understand. I don't know. I can't get their thinking. There's something, but that's why I say there's something more to this than just attitude problem with Stacy. There's
in emails.
Right.
Yeah. I want to start taking some phone calls. Let's start with Franco in Ontario. Franco, you're first up.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
Very
good.
King, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. King, I'm a big fan of yours. I've been watching you for a long time, and I just wanted to let you know that there's a lot of people in Canada here that support you, and I have a lot of friends that are big King fans, and whatever you do in the future, we wish you the best, just to start off with. And I wanted to ask you a couple questions. First of all, I don't know about the wrestling side of whether you want to continue wrestling, and that means, getting into the ring and actually wrestling, or do you want to do commentary or whatnot, and what the chances of an upstart company coming up in the future and maybe you going to work with them. But I think that Vince needs something that's going to hurt him as much as it's hurt a lot of people that he's hurt. And I really, truly, truly believe that about a year's time from now, when he's running both companies, that a lot of wrestlers are going to be really upset with the way that Vince does business, especially with contracts and whatnot and leverage. And I really, truly believe that somebody is going to show up at some point in time and get into the ears of the people that carry the belts. And I want your opinion on this. Say next year, 2002, right before WrestleMania, right before the Great American Bash, if that's what's going to be their premier pay-per-view, you get a lawyer or a couple of lawyers get into some of these people's heads that are carrying belts and say, look, you know what, you're making a couple $100,000, the pay structures come down, this, and this. Let's get everybody that carries the belts. And you know, Jerry, it takes at least 3 to 4 years to get champs over where they're officially over. And they get these guys and they say, you know, boycott WrestleMania, boycott Great American Bash, don't go there. You know, we'll go on TV and we'll say, look, we want a union for these wrestlers. We want a union for the people that are on the mic. We want a union for the managers and the union for the people that work backstage. And I think Vince at that point is going to say, holy cow, what did I get myself into? Do you foresee anything like that happening? Because that's the only way, the people that work in the business are going to have any leverage with this guy, because this guy is just going to go, like you said earlier, he's going to go on a rampage. He's just going to do whatever he feels like doing, and he's just going to use the wrestlers and the people behind the scenes like carcasses.
Well, there's a lot of validity to what you say, but as far as I could probably answer your question as just my own thoughts as to how I feel, in one word, do I foresee this happening? And the answer would be no. And that's simply because historically, wrestlers are their own worst enemies. They just usually aren't smart enough to do what's right for everybody. They're always trying to do what's right for themselves. You know, they're the main group of let's look out for number one guys that and I probably fit right in that category, but it's just a sad fact that that's just the way it is. I mean, I don't think you would ever get enough of the guys to say, yeah, let's all stick together and go against the only guy that's in the only promoter in the world, Vince McMahon. I just don't think it'll happen. There will be enough guys that'll go to Vince and say, forget those guys. I'm not going to join any union, Vince, or he, you got to realize this is not like these guys aren't air traffic controllers. So it's not like you. Which, by the way, got replaced. These guys can be replaced. I mean, the wrestling talent, these superstars are made by the promoters, and nobody is indispensable. I mean, he could take somebody literally off the street and make them into a superstar through the monster of the media of television.
And the other thing too is that now, because one guy's owning it, and there's probably going to be fewer jobs, there's going to be more people than ever looking for that opening. Those guys, right. Unless it's literally everyone sticking together, which isn't going to happen. The guys who say they're going to do it, the guys who say they're going to do it are going to be the ones with their throats cut at the end. I'll just give you an example. Brian and I have talked about this before. When the whole thing happened with Benoit and those guys, I mean, I could tell you Saturday night I was on the phone with many of those people, not necessarily the ones that left, but there were probably 16 wrestlers on Saturday night that were going to go up to Bill Bush and say, we're quitting if Kevin Sullivan is the booker. Mm-hmm. And, when it came down to Sunday, I mean, 6 guys went in that room, and the other 10, their feet were made of cement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it always will be. But I can't say that if you're looking out for your best interest, I can't say that that's necessarily wrong, because that's what's going to happen. Believe me, the promoter, the wrestling company creates those stars. They have the TV. That's the all important vehicle, and I mean it when I say you can literally take somebody off the street and force feed them to the public and make them into a superstar.
King, are you watching the ratings on Raw on Monday night? Are you following the ratings since you've been gone?
Yeah, I checked those on the internet.
Okay. You know that the ratings have not been the greatest since you've left. You know, Paul Heyman might be a great announcer, and respect to him, but their ratings are not what I think Vince wants. And
I mean, without a doubt, there had to be, and I can tell you this from being inside the WWF for the past 9 years, major disappointment over the ratings Monday night. I mean, major. A 4-7 on the last Raw before WrestleMania, especially with all of the mainstream publicity that was given to these shows because of it's the first night. What's going to happen with Vince buying the WCW and all of that stuff, and then for Raw to only get a 4-7?
And then the other part of it also is that second hour should have been through the roof because the first
no competition.
That's just no competition. But for the first time ever,
plugged it.
The Nitro was plugging, switched to Raw. I mean, the end of Nitro was, don't forget, coming up in the second hour of TNN, we're going to have this, and this, and Steve Austin and The Rock and all this. And it's like, Nitro was, instead of Nitro going off the air, I mean, Nitro went off the air, telling everyone switch to TNN, and they didn't do it, and that surprised me.
Right. Well, I'm not naive enough to believe that it's the old saying, one monkey don't make no show. Well, I know that I'm not the show of Raw or anything, but I think that I was a integral part of it. I think that the charisma and the chemistry that JR and I brought to that show was something that's really irreplaceable, and the thousands of people took it for granted and didn't even realize until, it's the old saying, you don't know what you got until it's gone, and I think it really opened a lot of people's eyes as to how important that we're the guys that are on that show more than all of the wrestlers combined. We're on more than The Rock, we're on more than Steve Austin, we're on more than Triple H, we're on more than Kurt Angle, we're on every minute of that show. And we're the ones that really are responsible for selling that product to the fans. And I think that JR had developed a unique way of doing that was entertaining. It wasn't hard sell. It wasn't like two shills sitting out there, which is what it reminds me of now. It's like two used car salesmen screaming at you. And I think people resent that. But I think, when all of a sudden when I was gone, I mean, I can only tell you by 42,000 hits on my little website that not many people even know about. 42,000 hits on the day this happened, and the thousands of emails I've gotten, and I can't tell you how many of them have said that I'm not going to watch Raw anymore. I'm not going to watch SmackDown. I'm not going to buy a pay-per-view anymore. Just basically in protest. And if one person or 1,000 people take the time out to sit down and write that to me, how many more people are thinking the same way out there that don't have the opportunity to express their feelings to me? I think that it has made a difference in the show. I think the show is not as good as it was, and I'm not knocking Paul Heyman. He's doing as good as he can do. It's just that there was a little bit of magic there between JR and I, and the way that we did the show. It's something that developed over a almost 9-year period, and it's something that can't be replaced overnight. And I think this has brought the people's attention to how good that really was. And that, combined with the way we were released, has turned a lot of people off.
I agree. I thank you very much for your time.
Okay. I was listening to that song, and it actually reminded me of that feud that we were talking about earlier, because the first time I heard Midnight Express's entrance music was for Randy Savage during that period when, was he doing it when we did with the thing with you, or was that actually a couple of years earlier?
I don't know, but you're right. As soon as I heard that music, it reminded me of something. That was an entrance theme that we had down here in the Memphis area for somebody.
Were you guys the first ones to do entrance music, or was the Freebirds doing that? Do you know the chronology of that?
Well, we were pretty innovative down here in Memphis. We had a lot of firsts. I know we had the first wrestling music video in like 1973. I did recorded a song called Bad News, and we did that as a wrestling music video. We did, and after that, basically started with musical entrances and that sort of thing, and a lot of things that basically became mainstream. I mean, after they were seen nationwide, the advent of cable and people being able to see the wrestling from all over, from New York or Atlanta, basically all over the country, was that was the big change. I mean, but a lot of this stuff had been going on regionally in different regions all around the country for a long time.
A couple of things, when we talk about the earlier part of your career in Memphis, we had a lot of emails about that. And actually, whenever we have a guest like Lance Russell, we've had Randy Hales on, and invariably, your career, that part of your career is always the main topic. You were there. I want to ask you a couple questions. Number one is if you could point to any one thing, what do you think was the reason that territorial wrestling, and especially like either both well-run and non-well-run territories ended up not making it? And also, in your run in Memphis, who would you say was the best opponent that you ever had, or your favorite opponent to work with? And who was the one guy who, if you could come up with a guy who you just didn't like to work with for whatever reason, but it ended up working out anyway, like box office wise?
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, which one? What do you want me to answer first? I think you asked something about what happened to regional wrestling and what happened to territories, and I think that most people realize that with the advent of cable, before cable there were, I think there were one time like 32 different regional wrestling organizations or companies around the country, and a different promoter in each one of those little regions, and these guys. They had an alliance. They had the National Wrestling Alliance, and these guys would honor each other's boundaries, and they wouldn't step on each other's toes, and they would exchange talent, and it worked well the way it was devised for many years. And then when cable came along, and all of a sudden you had the Vince McMahon on, and he realized, well, gosh, my wrestling show now is being seen all over the country. Why do I need to just stay in my region up here? Why don't I promote wrestling all over the United States, or all over the world for that matter? And that's what happened. And then the main stars from each one of these little regional territories, and what would happen in those days, it's not good, as Vince is going to find out, to have too many main stars. And what happened was there were probably 3 to 6 main stars in each one of these little regions. Well, all of these guys at that time, when the network or the national cable came along, well, naturally, these guys, it's human nature. They all wanted to be part of this new phenomenon. They wanted to be seen worldwide on cable. So that's how Vince was able to buy up or hire all of this major talent from these places. And subsequently, when these little small regional territories lost their major talent, and then not to mention the fact that Vince came back with their own homemade talent and ran in their own cities in his promotion, it eventually put all of these people, almost all of them, out of business. The one reason that our territory in Memphis survived a little bit longer than most of them was the fact that I was not only the main wrestling star in the area, but I was also one of the owners of the company. So it was in my best interest not to leave, not to go to work for the major company, because had I done that, then our company would have folded up too. So I stayed, and so we were able to survive, and hang on here because we didn't lose our main stars, and of course, finally Vince, they finally allowed me to come to work there and still work in Memphis. I was one of the first guys that was able to work for the WWF and not have an exclusive contract, where I could still go back and work our own territory. Everybody else had to go to work exclusively for Vince.
Why do you think that was?
Well, because I like to think that they wanted me bad enough and knew that I was not going to, that I wasn't going to leave Memphis, so to speak, and that we weren't going to just give up on our territory. And probably I think that maybe Vince had the foresight to realize that he was going to need some territories like Memphis to survive. I mean, just for what he's using it for now, a developmental. You can't, if all you have is your big major company WWF and nowhere to develop new talent, you just can't take somebody off the street and throw them on Monday Night Raw. They've got to be trained somewhere. They got to learn how to do what they're going to do on Raw somewhere. And so Vince, I guess, hopefully was smart enough to realize, hey, we better not have all of these places go under, because we're going to need a training ground for our future stars.
In 1993, when you made the move, that was a huge deal in wrestling, because you were a big critic, and largely to protect your territory, because you were fighting the WWF in your own territory. How hard was it for you to actually go to the WWF after the things you had said, or was it just one of those things where, it's business and everyone understood you were the owner of the territory, and whatever you said about the WWF when they would come to Memphis was just, trying to protect your own business, basically?
Well, I think most people within the wrestling organization realized that's exactly what it was. We were struggling. We were hanging on by the skin of our teeth, trying to avoid going out of business here in Memphis. And I'm not saying that Vince was actually trying to put everybody out of business intentionally. I really don't think that was what he was trying to do. That just was a natural progression when he had all the stars working for him. That just happened. But we here were struggling to hang on to our territory, and the things that I said to knock the WWF were just for that reason, to try to keep our fans here in Memphis loyal to our Memphis wrestling. And then when I did start working for the WWF, as I said, I think most of the people in wrestling knew what the situation was. However, a lot of the fans in Memphis thought, what's the deal now? Why are you all of a sudden working for the company that you used to knock so hard? And so, it took some explaining. I had to basically went on the air and told the people the truth of what was going on. So I think all of that has worked out for us, or at that point, and Memphis, was able to survive. And I think just the climate, so to speak, for wrestling. Memphis wrestling is almost still now the way it was run 30 years ago. We have a Saturday morning live wrestling show on local TV, and there was a time when, and this is not an exaggeration, that Saturday morning wrestling show we used to get, and a good rating is a 4 or a 5 or something like that. We used to get a 20 rating. A 20 rating.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was like it was unheard of. No kind of television. On Saturday morning, that wrestling show had more people watching than any primetime show on any network in Memphis. And it was just unbelievable. But, I think times have changed, and with all of the cable saturation and that sort of thing, the wrestling is not really a Saturday morning, staple anymore. I think now people expect to see their wrestling on Monday nights or Wednesday or Thursday nights and that sort of thing. I think it's a prime time show now, and so subsequently it's tough to still be trying to give the people the same thing that you were giving them 20 or 30 years ago.
You returned last week almost to the 7, right?
Yeah, we did a 6.7. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good. I was proud of that fact.
Wasn't the average like a 2.5?
I'm sorry?
2.5 was a real bad week.
Yeah, 2.5 was a bad week. But,
what they did the week before, though.
You talk about now there's another show on. There's a Memphis Championship Wrestling show that's on at the same time on Channel 30. And this is where now the WWF developmental talent will wind up. And their show this past week did a 0.3 rating.
Ooh.
Right. I mean, that's horrible. And it's just like, how is that going to help develop your talent to be seen on a show like that? Or to work on a show like that. It's almost demoralizing. I would think that's detrimental rather than being helpful to your new talent. Mm-hmm. They'll go off over in Arkansas and tape the show somewhere in a little school gymnasium with 25 or 30 people in attendance, and I think it's counterproductive.
Let's go to Jonathan in New York. Jonathan, what's going on?
Yeah. Hey, what's up, King?
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. What's up, Dave Meltzer? I'm the guy who called last Monday, if you remember.
Okay.
King, I would like to know, what's your next move?
Oh, that's a good question. We're just, Stacy and I both are just sort of sitting here biding our time. I mean, and of course this is, in one way it's good, and of course in another way it's not as attractive as, say, for instance, being at WrestleMania or whatever. But I mean, there's no lack of interest or no lack of offers or work out there. And right now, I have taken some bookings and taken some appearance bookings, and Stacy and I both have, and we're booked every single weekend all the way up through June right now. And we've had to turn down things. We've been offered a tour we've been offered a 21-day tour in England that we turned down. We've been offered a tour in Japan that we've turned down. And so it's not a situation where you're not in demand, and a lot of people don't realize how many independent promotions there are out there that still want to to have wrestling shows, and how many baseball card stores or memorabilia stores or wrestling stores that want appearances and autograph signings. And this Sunday, when everybody else is going to be at WrestleMania, I'm going to be in Winnipeg, Canada, doing a personal appearance at a custom car show. Quite honestly, I'm probably making more money there than I would have made at WrestleMania. But there's no shortage of that kind of stuff out there right now, and I'm sure that could go on for quite some time. But it's not the same as being on worldwide TV, of course. And after a while, when you're not on TV, that anybody would know that your popularity and exposure is going to suffer. So.
Right.
I don't really know exactly what the next moves are. Naturally, we would, as you heard me say earlier in our letter, we would love to get a call saying they'd like to have us back in the WWF, but I don't necessarily foresee that happening.
Well, I mean, during your time in the WWF, your character, Jerry Lawler, the announcer, was fascinated with puppies.
Right.
Am I right?
Right.
Right. Okay. And,
as I am in real life, but go ahead.
Okay, what do you think about the women of wrestling? That wild thing that they have on Channel 5? What do you think about that? Wouldn't it be like a next move for that character of Jerry Lawler?
Well, the only thing that I guess that's a syndicated show. See, we don't get that here in Memphis. I honestly have never seen one episode of that show. I've heard about it, of course, and
right.
And it's I guess very similar to back when they had and I guess the same guy is David McClain.
Yeah, it's Dave McClain.
So it's the same
it's
guy
very similar to Glow.
The Glow,
really same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. And this is probably not, a lot of people would disagree with this. I am a huge fan of women in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I am not a huge fan of women wrestling. If you know what I mean, I'm not crazy about seeing women wrestle, and I honestly don't think most people are. It's like that's almost a turn off to me. But
man, look at Lita. Look at Lita. She can wrestle. What do you think? And then they have Chyna. She's like
I know, but you know what? I mean, I don't. Honest to God, I don't like to watch Lita wrestle. I like to watch Lita standing at ringside with her pants almost, falling down and showing that thong. That's fine. That all looks great to me. But it's something about when I see the girls actually wrestle. I mean, and I'm just speaking for me personally. That doesn't do it. I mean, that does not excite me to see Lita do a hurricanrana on a man. I mean, sure, it's a great athletic move, and it some people may like it, but to me personally, that's not sexy. That's not that's not provocative or anything to me. I mean, I would much rather see somebody like Terry Runnels come to the ring half naked and just stand there. That to me is more exciting than seeing a girl do a hurricanrana or a moonsault or any of that stuff.
It doesn't make for a bad match.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And one more thing, Lawler. What do you think is going to be the final result of this purchasing of WCW thing with McMahon?
Yeah, we've seen the beginning result. How are we going to know that?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, all I can do is tell you my own personal feelings on it.
Yeah, go on.
I can assure you that this, me doing this interview is probably going to get big heat on me with the WWF. I mean, I could, and maybe are we going to have another break and then another segment?
We got one more break in just a second, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then during that break, I'll go downstairs and I'll get my release. I want to read you guys a paragraph of my release, but I can just tell you that just me doing this interview is going to probably pretty much close any doors on the chances of me coming back to the WWF. They just apparently don't want me talking about anything to anybody. But I just think that Vince having control of all of wrestling is
he's Julius Caesar now.
Well, yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, so of course this is one of those things where it's like a dog chasing a car. What's he going to do when he catches it? Sure, it's been great to try this long run, and Vince has been in this fight. And it's almost like, he's been slugging it out with Ted Turner and with WCW for years and years, and bang, he finally scores the knockout. Well, I think that after that, though, there's after that initial euphoria, there comes a letdown. And and I just think that not having any competition
Right.
is not good for anybody.
Good, yeah.
You know, it's
he's got nobody to beat up.
Right. It's, you know, you can't be number one unless there's number two.
Yeah.
Now there's no number two, so Vince is not even number one. He's just wrestling now, and it's like, and once again, I'm trying to preface this by saying this is not a knock on WWF. This is just something that happened because, you know, you are in competition with your opponents, and in this case, his opponent was WCW, and now Vince has won. But that's not necessarily going to be good for everybody because it's like, you know, wrestlers especially. I mean, you know, there's no leverage, there's no bargaining power, there's nowhere else to go. You know, so let's take what Vince gives us and like it. And but even for the WWF, for Vince, I just know how hard and how important it was for us every week, and how hard we tried to beat the competition. And I know during the shows, you know, we would have somebody would tell us whenever they were in a break, you know, when WCW went to break, in our ear they say, okay, they're in break. And JR and I would know that during that time we would have to, you know, because that's when the people clicked over. If they were watching Nitro and they went to commercial, boom, they came to Raw, and we were right there ready to reset what had happened. I mean, you know, we had to recap what had already gone on and tell everybody what was going to take place coming up on the show, and try to make what was coming up sound so exciting that they wouldn't hit that clicker and go back to Nitro.
Right.
You know, we made a concerted effort to do everything in our power to keep those people watching that WWF show. And now you don't have to do that anymore. There's not going to be anywhere they can click to. Where are they going to click to? Ally McBeal? I mean, you know, come on. So you don't have to have that. You don't have to walk that line. You don't have to have that edge.
What do you think about the XPW?
What's that?
XPW,
They're an independent group in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I haven't even heard of it.
Yeah, they're like ECW, but even more far to that level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well,
you know,
I mean, you know,
that's blood and guts.
That's one of the things that, you know, a lot of people talk about the ECW thing and don't realize what a small world or what a small universe they existed in. I mean, that's another thing I realized from these emails. I get so many people, you know, the ECW show was never even on here in Memphis, Tennessee, and there are a lot of cities around the country that it was never even seen in. I'm getting so many emails from people saying, who is this guy, Paul Heyman? You know, there are a lot of people that never really even heard of ECW, just like I'm in the wrestling business, and I've not even heard of this group you're talking about in Los Angeles. You know, unless you're on, you know, like Vince or WCW was, it's just a lot of people that have never heard of you out there.
Right.
To be really in it, I mean, to really be competition, you've got to be on a big cable station with a good time slot.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
A couple of things before we go back to the phone calls. Wanted to ask you, we've had a few emails about this one, and this has kind of been one of those rumors that's been going around. What have you heard, if anything, about Jerry Jarrett trying to start something, and what are your thoughts? Do you think it's possible to start something on to compete with Vince McMahon?
Right. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that where that story got started, I think that what Jerry Jarrett was doing at the time was not necessarily looking to start up something to compete with Vince McMahon. I think what Jerry Jarrett was doing was putting together a group of people that were interested, like Eric Bischoff was, in purchasing the WCW. And that's where all of this came about. And what happened was when and you know, he was quite serious about that, but then when all of a sudden the fact that the 4 hours of TV time was pulled off the table, and then that's where, you know, that's where his interest in that all went away. I mean, you know, because you know, what are you going to buy if you're buying WCW if you don't get that TV time? You're wasting your time, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I don't think that Jerry's out there now looking to. At least I haven't heard that. I did hear that he was trying to, you know, be in the running to be one of the people to buy the WCW when it still was going to be buying the Nitro show and the Thunder show.
Do you think he could have turned it around if he would have got the TV and everything?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, that could be turned around. That could have been turned around. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind at all. I mean, that. You know, I can remember there was a period of like 96 straight weeks when they beat the WWF. They beat us every single week, you know, and that what goes around comes around. It's no doubt that was just a sad case of mismanagement is what put that company out of business.
You know, I don't know how close you were able to watch it because Monday nights you were working every Monday night, so you saw actually probably very little of Nitro for the last couple of years. But, you know, I'm sure, you know, you heard enough about it. I you know, as a fan, I've seen worse companies because they had no talent or people who didn't know what they were doing running it. But on a big level with real talent and you know, in super television time, I don't think I ever saw such a comedy of disorganization as the last 3+ years.
Exactly.
Of WCW.
I mean, you would really have to, you know, you would really have to work hard to make the show that bad. I think.
At times, you're right.
Right. That's what I mean. And I even think that, you know, maybe in the not too recent past, that there were people intentionally making the show bad in order to drive the value of the company down. And I think, you know, it worked against them in the long run. And, you know, because I think that maybe some people thought that if the worse the company was financially, that the lower the price would be for them to buy it. And
it's interesting you should say that. I mean, it's a lot of people who've been in wrestling for a long time have suggested that.
Right.
And I mean, and not that like when it was going down, people weren't suggesting that from time to time too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, you know, the only thing is I think that there were people who were working really hard. They just didn't know what they were doing. You know, trying to make it go.
That's right. And you know, I mean, when you look at the history of WCW and you see as it progressed along, you see when you see people that didn't have a wrestling, you know, a pro wrestling background or a pro wrestling experience get in charge of things, you know, that's when it all went south. It just wrestling's a very, very unique business, and that's why Vince has been so successful. I mean, you know, his grandfather was a wrestling promoter, his father was a wrestling promoter, he's a wrestling promoter. It's something that you have to know, and true, you have to be able to change with the times, and the wrestling itself changes over the years, and you have to keep a young attitude and a young way of thinking, but the intricacies of running the wrestling business don't change. And you just can't throw somebody from the world of, you can't throw an accountant in charge of a wrestling company and make it be successful. There's so many other things in there that there are variables that have to be done that somebody that's just because he's a good businessman, you know, he's not going to be able to do that. And one of the main things in a wrestling company, and this is what Vince is the best at, or he's very, very good at, and what WCW never really once they got the business people in charge, what they were never able to do was create stars. I mean, you know, they had a good run when they bought some already established stars off, you know, from Vince, but once they rode those horses until they were no longer fresh, they weren't able to come up with anybody new. You know, they weren't able to create a star. And on the other hand, Vince McMahon took a WCW cast-off who they were just using in the mid-card and made Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, creates this, you know, takes a guy like The Rock, who we had down here in Memphis as Flex Cabana, and makes him the biggest star in the world. That's the difference. That's what WCW was never able to do, you know.
And the other thing is when they were on top is they thought it was going to last forever. I mean, they didn't realize that people, not even age, although that's part of it, but that you know, everyone's got their run. Like if you were on top in Memphis for 2 decades, but you were cycling opponents in and out. If you were still fighting. Like we talked about Randy Savage, you had a good run with Randy Savage for a little while. If you fought Randy Savage for 4 straight years, by the 4th year, you wouldn't be drawing anything either.
Oh, absolutely not. That's what I mean. You have to be aware enough to know that you got to change with the times and you got to change certain things. But there are certain things about the wrestling business that don't change, and that's where you're growing up in the business and your knowledge from being in the business for so many years is invaluable. And you know, just quite frankly, a guy like Eric Bischoff didn't have that knowledge, and a guy like Vince Russo certainly didn't have that knowledge. Not that they didn't have some good ideas about certain things, but there's just, you know, I mean, just one of the little things that you need to know, and I've touched on it earlier, was the fact that, you know, I think that some of these guys down in WCW used to think, oh, we'll get all the big stars down here, and then when we'll have the market cornered, and we'll be number one forever. Well, that if you really know the wrestling business, that's one of the worst things you can have happen to you. You don't want all the big stars, and they had too many big stars at one time, and all of these massive egos and all of these massive contracts, and that's what wound up was costing them right out of business. You know, you just can't. There needs to be a pecking order, so to speak, in a company.
Well, the one thing is now is WWF does have all the big stars.
Right.
Just about. Because the guys who are the big stars, because it's either the big stars or guys that aren't on television, because there are big stars that aren't in the WWF, but no one sees them because there's no outlets to see them.
Exactly. And and what's going to happen here in the future is very, very interesting to try to figure out what's going to happen, because don't think for 1 minute that The Rock and that Steve Austin and that The Undertaker and that Kurt Angle and that Triple H, don't think for 1 minute that these guys don't realize that, boy, once we're out of the picture here, we're out of the business. Mm-hmm. I mean, so they're going to be doing everything in their power to stay in the spot that they're in. They're not going to want anybody to take their place. They're not going to help anybody come along to overshadow them. And now all of a sudden you're going to have this influx of the WCW talent. They're all going to be wanting to get in that top spot. And this is one of the things that you had in the WCW. You had a bunch of guys that were big contract guys and big name stars, and they didn't ever want to step aside and let anybody else new come in. And now it's even going to be more so now in the WWF, because you step aside now, you step out of the business.
It's going to be survival of the most clever people.
Right.
Brian, I think you and I know who that is.
Yep. And in fact, when you look at it, with the way the contracts are structured, I mean, even stepping down from the main event to semi-main event, you're losing money right there.
Oh, without a doubt, sure. And believe me, I can assure you there'll be some restructuring of contracts after this deal goes through.
Oh yeah. Real quick, is there something do you want to read that thing to us, or?
You know what? Honest to goodness, I left during the commercial break. I went downstairs, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but I let an attorney take it home with him.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things that I'm not just going to sign my life away here. I want to let somebody that knows more about this kind of stuff read this thing, and that's basically what it's for.
Okay, let's go to Angelo in Connecticut. Angelo, what's up?
Yes, hi. I have a question. Are you planning to put any kind of lawsuit?
Well, no, I mean, not at this time. I don't guess I really have anything to sue anybody over, as long as I certainly still have some money coming, some royalties coming, and that sort of thing from the work that I've done in the past for the WWF. And as long as that shows up, I guess that everything would be cool there. As does Stacy. I guess you can get fired for pretty much anything. So
true, but the way that you guys was released all of a sudden and they lied, don't you feel like what they did to Bret Hart and some of the other wrestlers that was there at the time? They're doing the same thing to you?
That's just one of the things of the wrestling business. I mean, I've had so many emails comparing our situation to Bret Hart. People saying, look at Vince screwed Bret, and then now he screwed you guys. And our situation is very, very different in the fact that a lot of people say that Vince screwed Bret. I still don't know the truth of what happened on that situation. But how can you say that Bret really got screwed when he went to a company and started making $2 million a year?
And that's true too.
But in our case, we lost a job, and now we're truly unemployed with no income whatsoever. We don't have any place else to go to. So there's a little bit of difference there,
Okay, let's go to Jeff in L.A. You're going to be the last caller.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, how are you?
Fine. How you doing, Jerry?
Hi.
Hi. I go way back with you too. I forget which magazine you were doing the artwork with.
Oh my God, The Patriot.
The Patriot, and what was that guy's name?
Wrestling News.
Yeah.
A Wrestling Review, or is that what it's called?
Right.
Wrestling Review. Wrestling Monthly.
Was it Wrestling
Monthly?
Norm Keitzer was the guy that used to put that magazine out.
You betcha. So I go back to that, and I enjoyed the match last summer with the candy jar with JR, and that was a lot of fun. But I have to say,
I mean, it was something where I of course always enjoy getting in the ring and wrestling still, and every now and then I got to have some kind of pretty much like a little gimmick match or whatever there in the WWF. I never really felt like. And of course, it was difficult to step right from the announce table and get right into the ring and start wrestling, then go right back to the announce table. And I think they always valued my commentary skills more so than my wrestling skills. But I still really enjoy wrestling and have actually lost about 35 pounds and I'm probably in the best shape of my life as far as that goes. And I still enjoy doing that and was looking forward to get to do a little bit more of that up there. But it looks like now I'll be doing most of my wrestling here in Memphis and on the independent circuit.
Okay. Really, before we go, I got to get that one answer. What would you say was your favorite and your least favorite opponent in your run in Memphis?
Oh gosh. I always enjoyed working with Bill Dundee. We had probably the longest run where we wrestled each other more than anybody. I enjoyed working with Terry Funk. That was always a lot of fun. We had matches. As far as my least favorite, oh man. I don't know. I don't really remember anybody that just could say, oh my gosh, I hate to work with this guy.
How was Leon Spinks? Because you were the only one ever to have a good, I wouldn't say good match, but you were the only one ever to have a match with Leon Spinks.
You know what? Leon Spinks, I was such a big fan. I mean, it was like so much fun for me to do that, to get to be, all I could think of was, I'm in the same ring with a guy that beat Muhammad Ali. It was like a thrill of my life, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and of course, it was way at the end of Leon Spinks' career, and he was, I was looking at him, and his wife Betty was here, and he was like, it was almost like a caricature of himself. He was so cool, would talk with the teeth out. He wanted me to take him to a Kentucky Fried Chicken place, and it was a lot of fun,
We're totally out of time, Jerry. I want to thank you very much for doing the show, and best of luck, and however this business turns out, and wherever you wind up. It's a very, very interesting time in this industry.
And I'm sure you guys check it often and take news off there, but I'm going to put a new update on my website, kinglawler.com, pretty soon and try to keep everybody updated with, what's going on with Stacy and I through that and let everybody know where we're going to be and that sort of thing.
Cool.
Okay, best of luck, Jerry, and we'll be back tomorrow at 5 with Brock Lesnar.